They said humans were weak. They said humans were slow and soft and not made for war. They said when the real fight came, humans would run and hide like always they were wrong. It started with a message from the edge of the stars, a small outpost sent. A signal to the Galactic Council, short and clear. The swarm is coming, prepare yourselves. The council did not listen, and they said, the swarm was just a myth, a ghost story passed from ship to ship, a tale to scare children. They had no reason to fear shadows. Not when they had fleets and armies and technology that reached across the stars, but the outposts kept falling first. It was small mining stations, then it was trade hubs, then border worlds, then colonies, whole cities wiped away in one silent wave. No survivors, no cries for help, just darkness and empty space where life used to be. Council still did not act. They thought the outer species would handle it. They believed someone else would fight, someone else would hold the line, someone else would die for them, but the other species ran some. Begged the council for help. Some tried to hide their worlds behind defense walls. Some simply vanished into deep space, hoping the swarm would never find them. And still the humans stood. There was one. Last outpost on the far edge of space, an old human mining station built on a dry rocky moon. It had no value. No riches, no army, no ships, only a few people, a few guns, and a commander who refused to leave her. Name was Raynash, was not a famous leader. Not a decorated hero, just a soldier who had seen too many wars, lost too many friends, and buried too many names when the council sent the final message saying, retreat, there's nothing left for you. Reyna simply turned off the screen. We hold the line. She said to her team, we stay right here. There were only 13 of them, a few soldiers. 2 engineers, 1 medic, a mechanic, a cook, and a group of miners turned fighters. None of them trained for this kind of war, none of them ready for what was coming, but still they stayed. They checked the old weapons, cleaned the dirty rifles, set up traps and sensors. Repaired broken turrets with scraps and wires. They worked with tired hands and quiet eyes. Sky above the moon stayed calm for 3 days, and the 4th day the radar buzzed. They are here, said one of the engineers, and everyone froze for a second, not with fear, but with the sharp cold breath that comes before the storm. Reyna looked at the screen, hundreds of signals moving fast and silent, no ships, no engines, just shadows falling toward them, like black rain from the stars seal the doors. Reyna said, load everything you can and get ready. They did not scream or shout, no speeches, no fear, only movement fast and sharp, like people who knew this was the last thing they would ever do. Somewhere deep in space, a diplomat watched the signal from the outpost and shook his head, such waste. He said they should have left long ago. Humans never know when to stop, but he did not see what they saw. He did not hear the sound of boots on metal floors, the breath of soldiers behind helmets, the final quiet moments before the end. He did not see. Reyna lift her rifle and say, remember this. He did not hear the voice on the outpost saying this is a human station, we will not fall. He did not feel the ground shake as the swarm hit the surface. The first impact came like thunder, the second like fire. The walls groaned, the metal screamed, but the humans stood ready. Reyna stood in the center hallway. Gun in her hands, eyes like stone, hold the line, she said. The outpost, the ground cracked open. The swarm crawled out like black water made of claws and teeth and empty. Eyes, they did not think, they did not speak. They only moved forward to consume, but they met fire, they met bullets and bombs and screaming metal and humans who refused to run, and in that moment something changed. The swarm had never faced resistance like this, not from 13 people, not from anyone. The sky turned red from fire. The walls lit up with light, and the outpost shook with the sound of battle back. At the council, someone whispered, the humans are still fighting. Someone else said, that cannot be, but it was 13. People against a wave of death, and still the signal stayed. Alive still, the radar showed movement, and still the humans sent one clear message to the galaxy, we are still here. And the swarm had not yet broken through asterisk 13. Humans stood between the stars and the dark. They were not an army, they were not heroes from stories or champions from the past. They were just people some had once served in Earth's distant wars, but most had never seen real battle before they came to this forgotten moon. Youngest was 19, the oldest was 51, and none of them expected to be remembered. They came to fix machines, move rocks, or send reports back to Earth. They never thought they would have to fight, but now they stood shoulder to shoulder on cold metal floors looking out into a storm of death. Reyna walked down the hallway past each of them, checking gear, hands, patting shoulders. Eyes locking onto eyes. No one spoke, they had already said everything in the silence of the last night when they shared their food and stories, and last laughs one man had told a joke that made them all laugh until their sides hurt. Another shared a recording of his daughter singing back on. Earth soft and sweet and full of light, but now the jokes were gone and only the mission remained. Hold the line, that was the only route. Arena gave them numbers, not rank. She said names were too heavy for what was coming, and numbers would be easier to remember if someone fell. She called herself 1-2, was a medic, quiet with steady hands and old pain behind her eyes. And 4 were brothers, once miners, now holding heavy rifles, like they were born with them. 5 was a cook who used to dream of running a small place on Mars serving hot meals to tired workers. Now he carried explosives strapped to his chest. 6 was the youngest, scared, but not running, not even shaking anymore. 7 through 12 had been engineers and tech workers now. They moved like shadows, fixing broken walls and setting traps with metal teeth. And Fire 13 was silent, always watching. Always one step ahead. He had come from a quiet place on Earth with green trees and blue lakes, and now he was ready to die in Space Arena. Stood before them and raised her hand. You all know what this is, she said. You all know why we stayed. They nodded not. One of them asked to leave. Not one of them said maybe we should run. Not one of them broke. There were 13, 13, and 13, and 13. Walls trembled with each new strike from above the swarm, landing in waves, digging through stone, chewing through. The moon with claws and acid sensors, screen lights flashed. Warning signals echoed through the base arena, turned off the noise. We are not machines, she said. We do not need to be told when death is near. We look it in the face and we fight anyway. Hallway lights flickered as backup power kicked in. Shadows danced across the metal walls, and boots clanged as the team moved into position. Each hallway had a trap, each room a fallback point, each vent a secret route for escape or ambush to humans. Had turned the old mining station into a cage, a place where the swarm would bleed before they broke through. 3 and 4 set up a turret made from spare parts and old wires. It spun to life and made a low humming sound that made everyone smile. 2 checked her medkit again and again, though she knew it would not be enough. 5 handed out small red packets filled with energy paste, the last bit of food they had. 6 carried a small photo in his hand, his parents standing in front of a mountain. Smiling, he tucked it into his jacket and gripped his rifle. 7 and 8 finished welding a door shut. They slapped hands and moved on without a word. 9, 10, 11, and 12 rigged the ceiling with flame charges, ready to drop fire on anything. That crawled in. 13 stood by the main door, knife in hand, waiting for the first shadow. Then the ground shook harder than before. Dust fell from the ceiling metal, bent somewhere deep below. They are coming, Rena said. They are hungry, but so are we. We are hungry for one more sunrise, one more chance to be remembered. The main screen showed movement faster. Now bigger shapes with claws and teeth and cold, empty eyes. The swarm was learning how to move faster, how to hit harder, how to get inside. Arena looked at each of them one more time. She saw no fear. She saw fire when they speak of humans. She said they call us soft and weak and broken. Let them speak. We are not here to change their minds. We are here to show them what we do when no one else stands beside us. We are here to remind the stars that even the smallest light can burn the longest. We are 13, and 13 will be enough then. The outer door slammed open with a sound like the world breaking, and the battle began. The walls shook like thunder had entered the bones of the outpost. The swarm had arrived. They did not speak. They did not wait. They did not send messages or warnings or demands. They only came. Their bodies were like black stone with sharp lines and glowing cracks where heat poured through their skin like fire trying to escape. They crawled and leapt and tore through the outer wall like it was paper, not metal. The hallway lights flickered again. The ceiling groaned and dust fell like soft rain. Over the 13 soldiers, Freyna shouted now, and the world turned to fire turrets. Screamed bullets tore through the first wave of creatures as they dropped from the hole in the ceiling like falling shadows. Teeth snapping, claws reaching, some landed and ran straight for the defenders without fear or thought. 3 and 4 held the line with steady hands, rifles locked and firing one target at a time. One breath at a time, each shot pushing the enemy back a few steps, but never enough. 5 hit. The first trigger in the left wall exploded with fire. 2 creatures vanished in the blast, but more kept coming, pouring through the smoke like they were born from it too. pulled one of the wounded to cover blood on her sleeves and fire in her eyes. Her hands moved fast, wrapping wounds, tying cloths, pressing pressure, and whispering calm words even though her own leg was bleeding. 6 was shaking, but he did not stop. He kept his rifle aimed and kept firing, kept screaming every time he pulled. The trigger, like it was the only way to stay at Oliverena, was everywhere yelling orders, dragging bodies, pulling triggers. Resetting traps with bare hands and burned fingers, she moved like someone who had nothing left to lose and everything left. To protect the hallway became a furnace. The air stank of smoke and burning metal and blood, both human and alien. But still, the line held. Then came the second wave and everything changed. These were bigger, faster, smarter. They stayed and the shadows moved. Along the ceiling, crawled through the vents. 9 was the first to follow a sound above his head. And then nothing claws through his chest, and the scream was cut off before it reached the others. 10 saw it and shouted, but he was too slow. Reyna turned and fired again and again until the creature fell into burning pieces on the floor. Then she whispered his name once and moved on. There was no time for grief, not now. The swarm began testing the defenses, learning the trap points, awaiting the kill. Zones using their fallen as shields, as cover, as weapons. 12 dropped into a crawl space and found one waiting there. It lunged and bit into his arm, but he jammed a grenade into its mouth, and they both vanished in the blast too. More gone still. Humans stood still. The message beacon blinked behind Reyna, still sending the same signal over and over. This is a human station. We are under attack. We will not fall. The council heard the message but did nothing. They believed the station was already gone and saw no point in helping. They told each other that humans were brave but foolish, and that bravery could not stop the dark. But they were wrong. 3 and 4 were wounded but kept firing, holding each other up with one arm and shooting with the other. They had promised each other to stand until the end, and they meant it. 5 set the last fire trap in the center hallway and waited for the next wave to come. He held a small photo of a woman smiling next to a lake and then tucked it away and raised his weapon. 7 and 8 were gone, lost to a breach in the side tunnel, swallowed by teeth and silence. Only 6 were left, Norena too. 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the swarm was still coming. Reyna looked at them, each one bloodied, burned, tired, near the edge of death. We are the wall, she said. They may pass our bodies, but they will not pass our will. 6 looked up with tears in his eyes, not from fear, but from rage. They killed my brother on another station, he whispered. Then let them hear your answer, Reyna said. He screamed as he pulled the trigger again. The hallway echoed with gunfire and roaring and death still. The humans held still. The swarm broke against them like waves on rock. Still the beacon sent its signal out into the stars. Then the power flickered again, and the main wall showed a larger shape, moving in the distance. Something new, something bigger, something worse. Reyna stared at it and felt her heart turn cold. This was not a battle anymore. This was the beginning of something darker, and they had only one chance left. 1, hallway 1, breath 1, final stand asterisk. Night on the moon came without warning. No stars, no moonlight, only darkness, pressing against the broken windows and cracked walls like it wanted to come inside and swallow everything. The power was nearly gone. The backup systems ran low. The lights blinked like tired eyes, and the walls pulsed with heat and pain. Only 6 humans remained. Reyna stood at the center of the control room, her armor scratched, her helmet gone. Her face covered in ash and blood, not all of it. Her own too sat beside the wall, wrapping bandages around what was left of her shoulder. Her hands still steady, her breath slow and quiet. 3 and 4 leaned against each other. One had a broken leg. The other could barely see out of one swollen eye. But their rifles stayed close and loaded. 5 was silent, staring at the floor, holding the last 2 grenades like they were the only friends he had left. 6 sat with his back to the door, eyes wide, fingers shaking, a knife in his hand and a rifle across his lap. Swarm had pulled back for now. The hallway was quiet, but it was not peace. It was the kind of silence that comes before a scream. They are learning, Reyna said. They are watching us. Like we are prey. They already knew we would not run, but now they are trying to understand why we still fight. She looked at the others, and they all saw it in her eyes. This night would not end the same way as the last. We cannot hold them forever, she said. We do not have the power, the bullets, or the blood left to do it to. Looked up and asked then, what do we do? Reyna stood slowly, walked to the console, and stared at the old Cower grid map blinking with low red light. We make this place a firestorm, she said. We burn it so bright they cannot forget. We turn our deaths into a wall they cannot pass. The others did not argue, they only nodded and moved. They pulled wires, tore panels, set charges rigged every hallway. With flame traps and explosions, they worked with burnt fingers and swollen eyes and bleeding feet, and still they moved fast. Reyna gave each person a section of the station. One place to defend, one place to light when the moment came. When the swarm returned, she said, "We'd like the sky." And we go down screaming. 3 asked, "What if they do not come, Reyna?" Answered, "They will, because they are hungry, and because we are still breathing, and because monsters do not leave their prey alive." 5 finished the last charge and left a note on the wall, 3 words scratched into metal with the edge of a broken blade. "This is our strainer returned to the control room," where 6 had fallen asleep for the first time in 2 days, his rifle still in his lap and his knife still in hand. She sat beside and let him rest one final time too, stood at the window, watching the stars. No longer visible through the smoke and dust and cracked glass, she whispered to herself a name. No one else heard, and smiled like someone who had made peace with her. Ghosts, then the air changed. The walls began to hum again, the vibration low and steady. Like a growl in the dark, Reyna stood and whispered, "They are here." The swarm came without sound this time, no crashing, no screaming, only movement, shadows sliding through vents, crawling under doors, and falling from holes in the ceiling. They had learned how to be quiet, how to be smart, how to be cool. 5 saw the first one and threw his grenade before it touched the ground. A hallway lit up in fire and steel. And then he was gone, smiling as the second blast took him, with 3 of them. 4 dragged 3 into a corner and used his own body as a shield as the monsters broke through the door, his last shot carving light into the darkness before silence claimed. Him too stayed by the window until the glass shattered and the sky came rushing in. She fired until her gun clicked empty, then pulled a knife from her boot and vanished into the smoke. Reyna found 6 awake and shaking again, but he did not cry. He did not scream. He only nodded and followed her into the final hallway where they would make their stand. She gave him a torch and said, "When I tell you, burn everything." He asked, "What happens to US?" Reyna said, "We become the story they tell when no one else is brave enough to fight." The swarm came in, waves, claws, and teeth, and empty eyes filling the hall from wall to wall. And still the 2 of them fought. Reyna's rifle jammed, so she used the barrel as a club, bones cracked under the weight of her rage, her grief, her will. 6 lit the first torch, then the second, then the third, and fire danced across the floor and up the walls, eating everything. He screamed through the smoke, not in fear, but in defiance. Then the ceiling cracked above them, and something huge dropped through, black and wide and covered in plates like armor. Fire could not stop it. Bullets bounced off it. Reyna looked at it and smiled. "You are too late," she said, and then she pulled the final trigger. The last explosion tore through the heart of the station, and the night held nothing. The fire burned for 3 full hours, lighting up the black sky above the dead moon like a signal flare to the entire galaxy. Flames twisted through the wrecked halls, spreading through every vent and crack and tunnel, and scorched every last claw. Every last shadow, every last thing that crawled. Smoke rose so high it touched the edge of space and turned the stars into ghosts behind the heat and ash snow. One inside the station should have lived. No one, but someone did. 6 woke first, lungs burning, skin cut and bleeding from the fall, eyes blurry and head ringing like a broken bell. He was inside a collapsed chamber, the walls bent around him like a coffin of steel, but the heat had passed, and the ground was cold again. He could not speak. He could not scream. He could only breathe, and breathing meant he was still here. He crawled out through fire-black walls, climbed over bodies, both human and not, and stepped into a hallway that no longer looked like a hallway, but a tomb. Then he saw Reyna was still alive, barely, her back against a wall, her leg crushed under a beam. Her face burned, her eyes open. She looked at 6 and gave the smallest nod. "You lit the fire," she whispered. "You did not run." 6 could not answer. His voice was gone, so he nodded back and sat beside her, and for a long time they said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The station had fallen, but the line had held. Every trap had worked, every hallway had burned, every monster that came had met human fire and human rage and human defiance. The swarm was gone, not destroyed. Maybe not even defeated, but stopped, and that had never happened before. The first time in their long history, the swarm had been held back by a handful of dying humans on a forgotten moon. At the edge of nothing, the beacon was broken, the power dead, the signal silent. The galaxy believed the station had fallen days ago, but then something strange happened across space. A deep-range scout ship picked up something faint, not a distress signal, not a transmission, not even a voice. It was a sound, a human voice humming a song soft. At first, then louder and steadier, like someone was singing into the silence, just to remind the void that they were still alive. The crew on the scout ship listened. In silence, none of them human, and yet none of them moved or spoke until the song ended. Then a voice followed, rough and broken, but clear. This is Station 9 Echo. We held the line, and we are still here. Repeat, we are still here. The council heard the message and could not believe it. They had already declared the station lost, already sent words of sorrow, already moved on, but the message was real, and the voice was real, and the silence had been broken. Rada's voice traveled through the stars. Like a knife through fear, the song she sang was old and earthborn, full of sorrow and hope and fire. Reached places where no message ever had, into the homes of leaders, into the halls of power, into the rooms of children. Listening to stories about how humans could never stand alone. Now those stories were burning because the galaxy had watched a tiny outpost become a legend. One by one more ships picked up the signal on. By one more species listened to the song, and to the fire behind the words one by one. They began to speak of humans not as weak, not as soft, not as prey, but as something else, something unstoppable. The story spread faster than the fire ever had. 13 soldiers against a swarm. No backup, no escape, no surrender. And 6 stayed near the remains of the command room, patching the signal system with broken wires and melted tools. Okay. Had no medical supplies, no food, no water, no reason to believe rescue would come, but they stayed awake. They kept the signal alive, and every hour Reyna sang again, not because she wanted to, but because silence was the enemy. Now they would not let the silence win, not ever somewhere. Across space, a child heard the song and asked their father if humans really did that. The father said yes, and the child did not sleep, but stared at the stars. Warrior on a distant planet cleaned her blade and added a mark for Earth beside the symbols of the bravest warriors. She knew a councilman who once laughed at humans now stood quiet. And ashamed, the song reached even the swarm far away in their hives, in the black between stars. They heard the signal, feel the echo, and understood. The warning, humans do not kneel, humans do not forget, humans burn. Raina's voice was weaker each time, her hands shaking, her lungs failing, but 6 helped her hold the microphone, and together they sang once more, not for help, not for glory, but for memory, because in a galaxy that had left them to die, they were still singing. Asterisk fire did not just destroy the station, it changed it. The floors were no longer cold metal. They were black glass, melted by heat, so strong it turned steel into rivers. The walls were covered in ash, not from machines, but from monsters and people both lost in the same storm. And yet, something still stood inside that ruin too. Humans still breathed Reyna. And 6, they had no food, no clean water, no working weapons left, but they had fire, and that was more than Swarm expected. Every few hours, Reyna forced herself to move through the broken halls, her body broken, her steps slow, her pain buried beneath something harder than steel. Checked the traps, reset, charges rewired, whatever still sparked, and left marks on the floor that told 6 where to go if she did not come back. 6 followed each mark like a map through a dead city, carrying the only working torch they had and a blade made from scrap pea. Carved warnings into the walls in 100 languages, because someone might come and someone might not, but if they did, they would know this place burns one day. The sky above them changed again. Scout ship came too close. It was not swarm, it was not council, it was something new. A freelance signal hunter looking for lost tech, drifting near the ruined moon. He picked up a weak transmission full of static and fire. He heard a voice singing. He followed the sound down into the atmosphere, through the black clouds and red wands, and toward the surface. He saw the fire still burning in places where no flame should remain, and then he saw the wall line of burned earth stretched across the landscape, drawn by flame and smoke, a signal written in scars. Not letters. He did not land. He turned and left and sent the message to every open channel across the stars. Do not approach moon. Echo 9, the humans are still holding it. That was all he said. But it was enough, now the galaxy knew. Humans had not been saved. They had not been rescued. They had not been reinforced. They had built their own salvation from blood and rage and fire inside. The outpost, Reyna heard the signal echo through the old speakers and smiled, though her lips were cracked and her voice fading. She had won not because the swarm was gone, not because the station still stood, but because now they were remembered. She turned to Six and whispered, "The time has come." He nodded and followed her to the heart of the base, the place they had never opened, a place full of fuel and flame. Core, they had saved it for last, the final message, the final stand. They opened the chamber. Together, the heat inside so strong, it felt like standing in the breath of Astarena placed her hand on the control panel and closed her eyes. Not yet. She said, "We wait until they come again. We like this when we see the dark." And Six understood they would not die quietly. They would become the fire itself. Days passed. The swarm returned not in thousands, not in waves, but in a single ship, black and cracked and scarred from the last battle. It dropped 3 creatures onto the surface. Scouts. They moved like smoke through the ruins, searching, sniffing, waiting. They smelled death and ash and blood, but they did not smell fear. Then one step too close, and the trap triggered. A roar of fire shot from the wall and swallowed the scout whole. The other 2 fled, but not fast enough. Six lit the second trap and turned the hallway into a burning tunnel. Then silence again. Reyna coughed blood, but smiled. "They are afraid now," she whispered. Six sat beside her and watched the smoke rise through the broken ceiling above them. The stars blinked like they were watching. Reyna reached into her pocket and pulled out the last item she owned, a small flag, torn and dirty. The symbol of Earth almost burned away, but not gone. She gave it to Six. "Place it where they can see," she said. "Let it be the last thing they remember." He climbed to the highest part of the wreckage and tied the flag to a twisted metal beam. Fluttered in the wind, weak but still standing. Just like them, the signal was fading again. Reyna could no longer stand her voice was almost gone, but Six took the microphone and spoke for her. "This is Echo 9. We are not soldiers. We are not heroes. We are not many, but we are enough." The line was held. The fire still burns. "And if you come for us, again know this, you will find nothing here but ash and the will of 2 humans who would not foul." And then he ended the message. He placed the microphone beside Reyna's hand and sat with her in silence, waiting, watching, ready. Because the wall of fire was not a weapon. It was a promise, and it had not yet finished speaking. The moon was quiet again, not because the danger was over, but because everything that could burn had already burned. Ash floated through the dead halls like dust on a forgotten breeze, whispering over melted steel and blackened bones, telling the story of what had happened here without needing a single voice. The outpost was gone, its shape now twisted and broken like a skeleton of fire, reaching into the sky, but the message was still alive. It traveled through deep space, through static, through broken satellites and ancient channels left behind by empires that no longer existed. And someone heard Aita. Rescue ship came not because they were told to, not because they expected survivors, but because the message would not stop playing, and someone had to see. They landed far from the station, unsure if the surface was safe, unsure if the signal was real, unsure if this was not some strange trap set by something else, something worse. But what they found changed them. There were no guards waiting, no weapons aimed, no monsters crawling in the dark. There was only silence and a small flag waving in the wind above twisted metal. A symbol of Earth, scorched but not gone, held high a broken support beam like a final word carved into the sky. Beneath it lay 2 humans. One was seated against the wall, head bowed, hands folded over an empty rifle. The other lay beside her, one arm outstretched toward the old microphone, as if still trying to speak. Even in the Reyna and Six had not moved in days, but their story had the rescue team stepped carefully through the ruins, their boots crunching over bones and glass and melted floor plates, reading the marks on the walls and the warnings carved deep into steel. They found traps still active, fire charges still ready, and cameras still blinking with the last bits of power held in old batteries and patch wires. They saw the damage not just from weapons, but from something deeper, from people who had turned a broken station into a legend. With nothing but willpower and rage inside the control room, they found the final log. Video cracked and faded, but still clear enough to see Reyna's face, burned and tired. Her voice weak. She spoke of the line of the fight of the swarm and of what It meant to stand when no one came to help. We were not waiting for rescue, she said. We were not waiting for orders. We were waiting for the enemy, and we met them not because we were ready, but because someone had to. The video ended with a smile, not of victory, but of peace. The rescue team took her tags and Six's tags and the flag, and they left everything else untouched because this was not a tomb. This was a monument. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anything before Aina became a name. Spoken in hushed voices in war rooms and training camps and among children who once feared the stars, became the symbol of all who fight not for orders, but for those beside them, the forgotten ones, the ones who never get statues. Outpost was never rebuilt. It was left as it burned, and then silent ships passed by but never landed. Some said it was cursed. Others said it was sacred now. One ever agreed on what to call it, but all of them remembered it somewhere far from the wreckage. A statue was made. It showed two humans, back-to-back, weapons and hand flames at their feet and stars behind them, and below it were the words, "We held the line," and still the message played across the stars in broken fragments in the hum of old machines in the wind of abandoned stations. "We are still here, we are still here, we are still here." Swarm never attacked again, not because they were defeated, but because they had learned. They had felt what it meant to face something that would not break, and they did not want to feel it again. They moved elsewhere, into darker corners, into places where legends did not yet burn, but the stars remembered. The council, who once called humans weak, now watched them with quiet respect and deeper fear. They sent no thank you. They gave no medals, but they never again left a human outpost unguarded back on Earth. People gathered to listen to the recordings, to sing the song. Raina sang to whisper the names of the 13 and to light fires in their memory, fires that never went out, fires that crossed generations, fires that became tradition, fires that said, "We will not fall in silence. We will not vanish in fear. We'll burn until the dark remembers, and the line will always hold, because once long ago on a forgotten moon at the edge of nothing, 13 humans stood, and in their fire the galaxy was changed forever."